Good afternoon, writers, and welcome to another episode of Tea with Tara. Today on the show, we have Dr. Nancy McKinley. Nancy McKinley is an award-winning author of fiction and nonfiction. She earned her PhD from State University of New York at Binghamton, receiving the John Gardner Newhouse Award. She received an MA from Colorado State University and a BA from College of the Holy Cross, where she was one of the first females at the previously male school. She is a founding faculty member for the low residency Wilkes University Maslow Family Graduate Program in Creative Writing. She also teaches fiction and nonfiction and supervises the Writer as Teacher internships. St. Christopher on Pluto by West Virginia University Press is her first novel in stories. It was also a finalist for the Colorado Book Award in 2021. The book was featured on NPR Fresh Air by Maureen Corrigan. Nancy McKinley grew up in New Jersey, and she currently lives in Fort Collins, Colorado with her spouse, Mike, and visits her daughters, Darcy, Kelsey, and Hallie around the globe. So stick with us, and in just a few minutes, we'll be joined by Dr. Nancy McKinley. Stay with us. Hi, and welcome back to Tea with Tara, Conversations about Writing. We are joined by Dr. Nancy McKinley. Dr. McKinley, welcome.
Well, hello, I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here. It's been a while since we saw each other.
Yes, and you know, despite the pandemic, Zoom is great for us to connect.
It really is. So I'm gonna jump right in by asking you when you first became aware that you wanted to be a writer.
You know, as a child, I was very shy, and I was in a huge grammar school class, you know, 50 to 60 students in the class, and often the nuns had us write stories, and I was always too shy to read mine out. And so the nuns would read them out, and suddenly everybody wanted me on their kickball team at recess. So I realized it was a way for me to connect, and I always was drawn to writing story and reading stories. It was a way for me to make sense of the world I inhabited, you know, from a very young age. However, I didn't look seriously at writing until I was out of college, even though I was an English major. And through high school, you know, I participated in various writing clubs, and I wrote for the local newspaper and even got paid for it, did a teen scene column. And when I finished college, I did some freelancing for a few years while I was teaching. And then when I started graduate school, maybe 7 years after I finished undergrad, I really made the commitment to write. I thought, I need help with this craft. I know this is what I want to do.
And so what is your writing schedule like? How do you balance everything you do plus the writing?
Well, on a good day, I get up before sunrise. I just wake up. I don't set an alarm. And I get some coffee. I move to another room, to what I call my day bed, where I can watch the sunrise as I drink coffee and write in my journal. And I always begin with the same thing. I record the temperature and the weather. Because years ago when I moved to Pennsylvania, everyone would say, oh, this is unusual. This is very unusual weather. So I wanted to see, is that really the case? But that gets my pen moving on the page. And then I, you know, journal write for a while. And then after that, I move to my laptop and work on whatever project, be it fiction or nonfiction, for a couple of hours, sometimes longer. And if I go too long, it's like I have a writing hangover. The next day I've overdone it. But, and then I, you know, shift, I walk, I get exercise before I shift into other endeavors.
And what do you think about the notion of writer's block? You know, the famous writer James Joyce, it's been said that he struggled to even get one paragraph on the page, whereas his one-time friend, then turned rival, Gertrude Stein, seemed to just be able to write effortlessly. So what do you think? Is writer's block a thing, or is it more lazy?
I think it is a thing. It's hard getting those words on the page. Some days they flow easily, other days it's, you know, a trial, but it all balances out. Often I think writer's block is mistaken for not really understanding your subject matter, what you really have to say, that you have to work through, maybe do more brainstorming, pre-writing. And some people have to think while staring at the page and then bring forth the words. So it really depends on each individual style. For me, sometimes I just need to take a break to replenish the well. I need to keep the writing playful and energizing. And sometimes when I get manic, like, I gotta get this done, I gotta get this done, then it doesn't come well. So it much for me reflects my mindset.
Right. It doesn't help to be overwhelmed, right? By your
Yes, absolutely. And to turn off the self-criticism, the self-editor, to ignore that and just write. And so I have, many writers have to banish that voice in their head that says, oh, this isn't good, you got to redo this, just, change it around. So I think that plays into it as well.
And how much research do you devote to your books when you're writing? How much, and do you enjoy the research process?
Oh, I love research. I've worked for a lot of historical societies. Early in my career, I taught social studies. I always loved history when I was in school, and that level of research as well. So it depends what I'm working on. And sometimes I do research before I get going, or as I'm in process, I realize I need more information. So I'll stop to do that. And it helps if I'm outlining and planning, because then I can see where I need the research, and I do that before. But actually, even if I've done a lot of research beforehand, sometimes I have to look back at something else. But I have to be careful, because then that becomes its own form of subterfuge and can derail you from the process.
And how about the editing process? When they said when Harper Lee was writing To Kill a Mockingbird, or the editing revision process, I should say, she had to revise it so many times. It's been said that she got so frustrated, she took the manuscript and chucked it right out the window into the snow.
I can relate. I can understand. I haven't done that, but I learned I have to keep careful drafts. And in my most recent book, St. Christopher on Pluto, I revised many times, and some of the pieces were published as stories. And those pieces evolved, and characters' names were changed as I rethought the character. So I had to be very careful about that as well. So I revise many times. The first draft is just finding what I really want to say and show about characters. If it's nonfiction, what I'm trying to show or explain about an aspect of life. And then it's not until the next draft that I really start refining and trying to bring forth more artistic elements.
Do you keep a journal at all?
Every day. I'm a compulsive journalist.
Is that
so I write every morning I journal, and then sometimes in the afternoon or evenings. And I have journals about specific writing projects too, where sometimes I talk to myself about the project. Why can't I write this next scene? What's my problem? I learned that from a student who would write me long emails about why she couldn't get in her assignment, why she wouldn't be able to do it. And in the process of writing me those emails, she realized just what she'd had to do, and then she would get it done. So I have learned to do the same thing for myself at times. It's fun. I love journaling.
And you also teach creative writing. So what makes a good creative writer? What do you look for in your students? How do you help them to be, when they come to you and want to be better creative writers?
Well, this will sound funny, but they have to love to write. Some individuals are in love with the idea of being a writer, but they're not really comfortable with putting in the hours and the isolation that's required of writing. Yeah. I think a good creative writer loves language, loves the nuance of story, be it fiction or nonfiction or any of the genre areas, and has an appreciation for life. And one's own voice. I forget who said, all the stories have been told, it's the singer that makes the difference. So a good writer lets words sing from the page.
And what do you think about, one of the writers that we have in common that we like is Willa Cather?
Oh, I love her. Yes.
And she won the Pulitzer Prize for writing One of Ours, which was about World War I believe. And I think she based it on her nephew dying in battle. Now, Ernest Hemingway had a problem with that because he said, what does a woman know about war? So my question is, can a writer write something that they don't know, about?
Yes. All the time. I mean, writers know the human condition. They can research. They know what they've seen. They know what they've been told. And certainly, yes, I absolutely agree with that. They can write that.
So you don't necessarily have to be in the war. like Hemingway was in the war and he thought, well, why
Right.
is she writing? But she also won the Pulitzer for the book, so that might have irked him too.
Right, exactly. And I think women who didn't behave in a certain way for Hemingway irked him.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. And many writers started out late in life, such as Willa Cather and Laura Ingalls Wilder. Do you think that writers in their 20s have anything to say? Or do you think that the more experience that you gain through living is better at becoming a writer, say in your 40s, 50s?
I mean, certainly when writers can draw from the wellspring of life experience, it enriches their prose, it enriches their story. But absolutely, writers can tell their story, tell what they're seeing 20s, 30s on up. There's an anthology about writers' first stories, which is great to look at because often for the more experienced writers, we see work that came out later in life. But when you can look at their earlier pieces, that's very helpful. I know when I got my master's, we had to choose a master figure and read everything that they had published or you could get a hold of from their early times till later. And that was quite illuminating.
Yeah. So, lately we're hearing a lot about the book banning, which is obviously it's nothing new, but
Right.
does a writer bear any responsibility for their words? I mean, how much responsibility should we be worried about if we're offending somebody?
You have to tell it true. And that's the responsibility of the writer. I think so many individuals come at writing with their own baggage that is the reader's issue, not the writer's issue.
Right. And how do you feel about or where do you get your inspiration from when you write?
Everywhere. The world is the wellspring of my experience. And I'll plant a seed for a piece. Sometimes it flourishes and takes off, sometimes it doesn't. So for me, it's very much the world around me, the natural world, as well as characters and in community. I think it's very important to show how we shape and sustain community. And I would like to bring forth a sense of hope within that. Although for many there isn't, even amidst the darkness, I would like to bring forth a little light.
And are you concerned about criticism toward your work? Do you worry about what critics have to say, maybe? Or
well, of course.
it bothers you?
But that we always say a writer has to develop tough skin.
Yes.
And it's a lifelong process. And sometimes I learn from that criticism. I've been in plenty of writer workshops, which that's really helpful because the purpose with that criticism is for on improving the story, making it shine more brightly for the readers. And there's, a sense of shared process. But yes, sometimes when I've read criticism of my work, it gives me pause. And I don't know where that reader is coming from.
I used to cry. And when I used to send in a story, if it got rejected, I would get a little, and then I would think, this can't go on. You can't cry every time something doesn't work out.
Lots of writers tell this story, and I always thought they were making it up, but it really happened to me. I wrote a story called Man Holding Egg, and it's set in the Virgin Islands. I spent my 20s teaching and living in the Virgin Islands. And I sent it out, a bunch of places and was getting rejected. And one day I got a rejection, and it said that, due to its brevity or lack of development or something like that. And then I opened the next letter and it had won a North Carolina Fiction Syndicate Prize. And it said the reason it was chosen was due to its brevity, which conveyed so much in so few words. And then it got published all over newspapers there with artists doing renderings. So, that really does happen, and much depends on the reader.
And have you ever been emotionally attached to either your characters or something that you've written where you had a hard time letting go of the story? Once it was over, you kind of miss those people?
Well, I'm always attached to what I'm writing. And basically, I love what I'm writing, even if it's difficult. I'm a parent, and sometimes my daughters were very difficult as I was raising them, but I still loved them and got through it. So same with some, stories and characters. But yeah, my main characters of MK on Colleen in my most recent book, St. Christopher on Pluto, kept coming back to me after I, finished the book and I was getting on with some other things. And I kept hearing them and realizing how they would be seeing situations. So I realized I wasn't finished with them yet. So I went back to them and I'm working with them more. But I've done some link stories in the past as well. So when I have characters that I enjoy spending time with, certainly I continue.
Do any of your daughters write?
They're all wonderful writers. When they were growing up, I would always check their assignments, and it got to the point in high school they didn't want to show me their work before they left for high school. And I would say, well, no, I want to see it. They said, my teachers don't care. And I said, well, I do. And they all do forms of writing in their jobs. My one daughter is a park ranger, but she does educational programs. And then another daughter is an engineer, and she's writing up programs. And then another daughter is doing contact work for a world sustainability nonprofit, and so she's writing there. But they like writing letters, so that's really nice.
Yeah, letter writing is an art form in itself.
Yeah,
just like journal writing.
I think.
Yeah. Well, who are your favorite authors?
Well, Willa Cather, of course.
Shirt on, actually.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful.
All of her book titles.
Catherine Ann Porter. I mean, it changes all the time. I've just been on a Louise Erdrich kick. I think she's a wonderful writer. And those are writers, and also Flannery O'Connor, which I know she's been getting a lot of criticism concerning matters of race, and I understand that. But these are writers who influenced me early on, and I keep going back to them. So much of what I read is in growing up were male writers, and even in college, I was weaned on male writers. So it was exciting for me to see how female writers apprehended the world and what they brought to the page. So I can return to them time and again.
Do you relate to any famous literary characters? Like for me, it would be Scout Finch or Joe from Little Women.
Oh,
any of them that you'd like to meet, maybe?
Oh, I mean, sure, I'd love to meet them all. No, I can't. I can't offhand. I mean, I'd love to meet Scout. Yeah. I'd love to, sit down with her. But that's a good question. We used to have parties come dressed as your favorite literary character, things like that.
Sounds fun.
So those are always good. Molly Bloom was always a fun one. Always got a lot of attention. But yes, I can't say offhand. Yeah.
Any writers you'd like to meet, living or dead? Any famous writers?
I'd love to meet Catherine Ann Porter. I'd love to meet Willa Cather. I would love to talk with the Louise Erdrich. And also, those are some of the main ones I think I'd really enjoy. And I love meeting writers. I've had different jobs where my position was to bring writers to campus, and
Oh,
I've
yeah.
always enjoyed doing that and celebrating, their readings. And I like going to conferences when we have that experience.
Do you like to read about their lives too and find out how they got where they are? Their
Yeah, I
journey?
do. I do enjoy that. And sometimes I'm very surprised, by the paths that they've taken.
How do you decide on the titles for your books, or does the publisher do that?
Um, it's so hard, it's something that just flashes. And I'll mention St. Christopher on Pluto again. I just knew, well, I was talking about the book with my sister-in-law and her sister-in-law. And I know my sister-in-law, we all grew up together. We all went to the same parochial school, and she lives in Danville, Pennsylvania, and they were out gardening, and I was telling them about the book, and I needed to come up with a title, and I was mentioning how there was a St. Christopher statue on the Big Blue, the old car, and how this one character was championing, for the rights of Pluto that had been debunked as a, planet. And so they started laughing and said, well, what about St. Christopher on Pluto? And it just clicked. And when my publisher was, suggesting edits and cuts and things to take out, the publisher didn't think it was an appropriate title and didn't necessarily want me to use it, but I held fast. I said, no, this sticks. And that was great, because then when Maureen Corrigan on NPR did a review, she picked up on the title right away and understood its symbolism and why it worked for the novel and stories. And I thought, okay, that was the best endorsement I could have had. So yeah, for me, it's just a flash. And I guess it's like looking at an impressionistic painting where there's all those little dots of color. And from a distance, you get one picture, and that's what forms in your mind. And then you move up close and you see it's just all these little dots. That's how it kind of works for me to get titles.
And writing is a repetitious art form. I mean, the topics have all been covered many times before,
Right.
and ideas just keep getting recycled. So as a writing professor, how do you make sure that your students' work is fresh? What do you tell them to keep their work unique?
Tell their story, believe in their story, because that freshness will then come through with the prose, with the voice, with their arrangement. So certainly, while we'll say, there have been many told, the stories have been told over and over, not the way they'll tell it. And that's the difference.
And how do you feel about the parallels between writers and their work? Some writers like to distance themselves from their characters, and others admit to adding like elements of themselves to their characters. Is it right to constantly or consistently identify a writer with their characters? Like how
I think that can be really dangerous. I didn't want to use a first person narrator for the majority of my piece, but I needed it for, I wanted to work with an unreliable narrator. And I thought, well, people are going to think I'm that narrator. And it's really happened where I've been at readings, or, people have asked me about it. No, that narrator is not me. And so I think you have to separate the author from the work. Know that, just as is the case with any author, they'll draw from what they've done and seen in life, their wellspring of experience. Something has fertilized their subconscious to develop art. However, I think it's dangerous to draw conclusions about the person of the author as evidenced in the character.
Right, to make like a biographical sketch of the author based on the work, because
no, I think
that happened
Yeah.
with me. My first novel that got published, people were more interested in drawing parallels. All of the characters were based on people that I knew, but they weren't really portraits of the person. They were just some characteristics, and everybody wanted to know, instead of being concerned with the characters, everyone wanted to know who they're based on and did that really happen to that person?
Yeah, I've been asked similar questions. I've visited a lot of book groups, which I love doing. I love going into book groups. But they'll say, well, which character are you? And I'll say, well, there's a little bit of me in every character, even the car. And just like as a parent, my children have some of my DNA, but it's not me. So they're very different. So it's similar, I think, with the creative act of writing.
What books would we find on your bookshelves if we went into your house?
Well, it depends which room. Is it the nonfiction room? Is it fiction room? You know, right now in the shelf right next to, my relaxation area, I've got a book by a former grad student, and we're friends, Suzanne Ullman, Shadow Migration, and it comes out March 1st, but I could get it ahead of time. And it's a wonderful nonfiction. Louise Erdrich's The Night Watchman, a book from years ago, Tales of the City by Armistead Maupin, set in San Francisco, but it's episodic and something I'm trying to do with my work. So I like to look back and read that, and it's fun, it's upbeat. Ibram Kendi's nonfiction, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Let me think what else is there. The collection, the most recent Best American Short Stories collection. I've gone back to Octavio Butler's dystopian Parable of the Sower. The current, and it was a National Book Award nominee by Disha Philia, Secret Lives of Church Ladies. So I have a really eclectic bit going.
And how did you get into teaching creative writing?
I had not intended to be a teacher. I thought I wanted to write for educational television. So as an undergraduate, I was told, well, you better get certified to teach if you really want to get jobs teaching, working in educational television. And I found I really liked teaching. I had taught swimming and ice skating as summer and winter jobs, and I always enjoyed that. But I found that a lot of my English classes would so overanalyze material that it would rob the joy of what I had read. So I didn't want to participate in that process. So I really enjoyed it. I got a blanket certification of K-12 for social studies and language arts. When I think, about it now. But it was great. It opened doors for me. I've got to teach all over the country and out of the country. Teaching provides inroads to the community and learning and seeing about people, and it works for me. Not for everyone. I learned how to maintain boundaries and for my time allotments. But I started teaching middle school and then high school, and then after I got more grad school, working at the graduate level, English literature, and then moving into the creative writing program at Wilkes, and I found my dream. I'm very fortunate.
Do you like to go on any literary pilgrimages? Do you like to visit authors' homes or?
Yeah, when I'm traveling, if I'm in an area, I do enjoy that. Let's see, I've seen Mark Twain's homes in Australia, where he stayed in Brazil, and then Hawaii, and of course, driving across the South. And so, that's fun to see the same writer in different places. I think of William Kennedy. He said, you travel out, you go just to the point where you have to turn around and come back home again. And I love seeing that happen for writers.
I still would love to get to Nebraska to see Willa Cather's home.
Yes, you must. And yes, I have been there, and it's great. Yeah, it's wonderful.
So it's worth the trip then.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes.
So do you have any advice to aspiring writers?
Write, keep a journal, write, really and truly write and read. The correlation between the two, reading provides a lot of the brain food and sustenance for writing. And enjoy it. Trust your story. You don't have to write somebody like somebody else. Allow your story and your voice to come forth. We need, the world will be a much better place with more writers writing. So
yeah, I had some classmates when I was in an undergrad, and they didn't believe in the correlation between reading and writing. You don't have to read to be a writer, they would say. I said, well, you're not going to be a writer then.
Yes, yeah.
And we did a lot of reading at Wilkes.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think that's integral to the process.
And you don't necessarily, because you're reading something, because I forget which writer it was. One of the writers that I was reading about said right before she starts a new work, she does not like to read books because she's afraid of mimicking the style or the voice. I mean,
Yeah, I know what she means. And then for me too, sometimes if I'm really working hard with fiction, I'll only read nonfiction. I love to read magazines and journals. But I think I've learned to recognize the danger signs if that starts to happen, the mimicry. And I think it did happen when I did my master's thesis, decades ago. I had studied everything by Catherine Ann Porter and Willa Cather. And I think I had some similarities going on there.
So what are you currently working on? Do you have a new book in the works?
Yes, I do. And it's a sequel to St. Christopher on Pluto. And I'm in the midst of that. And I'm also wrapping up a collection of nonfiction narratives, growing up female.
Can you tell us a little about St. Christopher? Can you give us a little idea what it's about?
That book? Okay, sure. Yeah, it's a novel and stories. And so I chose that form because when I started, I thought, what if this doesn't go? What if it doesn't work? And so I wanted to show two women at midlife who were playful and fun, and they had known each other since elementary school, meeting in a parochial school. They lost touch in high school and young adulthood, and didn't reconnect until they were both working at a bankrupt mall. And whereas they learn to navigate the difficulties of their relationships, they have a wonderful spirit. And I wanted to bring that forth. As I said, I had never seen their kind of voice in literature, so it was really important for me to show that. And they are very connected to community. They wanted to show how despite economic I wanted to show how despite economic downtimes in the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre area is where the fiction is set, that there is beauty amidst the blight. Because I can remember the first time I flew into the area, I was overcome by the natural beauty. And then we started driving along and seeing tire dumps and mine tailings and whatnot that you didn't see from afar when coming in on an airplane. And I wasn't quite sure where I was living. And I thought, what is this place? And then I got to know the people, and I began to grasp how the landscape contributed to a sense of resiliency. So I wanted my characters to show that. And rather than a dystopia, I wanted to show that, there's beauty amidst the blight. And there's still a community of hope filled with people who are looking out for one another. They offer joy, they offer laughter and goodwill. And they have a spirit that can bring about positive change. And I think it's very important for readers to understand and believe in that power.
Yeah, it is. It sounds like an awesome book. I look forward to the sequel too.
Well, thanks.
Do you write anything else? Have you ever written poetry, or do you like to write plays at all?
I wrote a lot of poetry when I was younger. I think in part because I'm a terrible typist. I wouldn't take typing in school because I was scared of being put into the secretarial tract, and I didn't want that in my future. And I love poetry. I love the shaping of imagery. And I did write plays. I taught at an underserved community center in Paterson, New Jersey, and there weren't any published plays that the students there, and they were from elementary through high school, could relate to. So I started writing plays that reflected more of their world. And then that's what they worked with. And I still work with scenes that way. I think the training of writing a play is very helpful to fiction and nonfiction, but no screenwriting really. I've done dabbling, but for me, it's all about story, be it prose, fiction, or nonfiction. Story is how I like to navigate.
And where could we find your book? Are you on Amazon?
Yes, I'm on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If you just Google my name, that will come up. and yes, right there. And then on my website, there's also a listing of all different publications as well, a lot of literary magazines and anthologies and whatnot. And that's www.McKinley, like writer, WRITE.com.
And you're still teaching?
I am. Yes. So I teach, I work with fiction and nonfiction students. I teach the intro class that everyone takes when they arrive to the program. And then often fiction foundations, and I mentor students in fiction and nonfiction. And I also supervise the writers as teachers practicum, and I encourage teaching the arts to underserved communities.
And other residencies back now in person, or are you still online?
We're still, for January, we were Zoom, but the plan is to be back on campus in June for Lit Fest. You should come, it'll be really fun.
I should.
Our new director, David Hicks, has started Lit Fest, setting up a big tent, and readings are outside at night. It's really very fun.
Oh yeah, you have to remind me, send me a message about that.
I will do that.
So Dr. McKinley, we are out of time, unfortunately, but I want to thank you so much for being on here and sharing your journey as a writer with us.
Well, thank you, and it's been great to be here, and I look forward to reading more of your work.
I look forward to reading more of your work. I'm looking forward to the sequel. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, take care.
You too. So that wraps it up for another episode of Tea with Tara. I want to thank Dr. Nancy McKinley for being on the program. And remember, you can get her book on her website that she provided in this, and also on Amazon. So as always, writers, I look forward to the next episode, and keep writing.